You can see where I got sunburned yesterday. This was a hand here, I think, and I totally just missed that little spot. I think we are set up. A little bit crooked. Set up and ready. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Catherine Hubert. I'm the owner here at Chez, and I am excited to be talking to you today about the term special needs and where is the appropriate place for that term within disability language and culture, or is there an appropriate place for that term within disability culture and language? We're going to jump right in. This is something that I have given a lot of thought to personally. I am a non-disabled human speaking on this subject matter, so know that is my lens and life experience going into this topic. I have worked in and been involved in the disability community for a lot of years, and the term special needs and then special education, exceptional children, Special Olympics, etc., have gained a lot of traction over my lifetime, but that's a more recent term that's been used in the history of disability language. And so we're going to talk about it. There, as with a lot of advocacy in education work, there's mixed opinions and thoughts about this term and how it's used. So I'm going to give just some of my general sentiments about it, ways that I would caution you against using the term, and then ways where I think it might still have a place within our language or kind of database of disability terms. So jumping into that, as always, if you have any questions, thoughts on it, please put them in the comments below. It's really fun to get to read those and to engage with you in that way, and it helps continue to push and shape our own mindset and understanding around some of these topics. So we appreciate you being part of that. All right, that being said, let's jump in. So, special needs. When is that potentially helpful? When is that harmful? As with most language and terms, a lot of the help or harm that it can do is based on the meaning or emphasis behind something. You can take a word or a phrase that initially had no stigma or derogatory meaning attached to it and make it that simply by the way that you express it, your tone, and the context in which it's being used. That's where I personally think special needs falls into place. We've talked about the danger of disability euphemisms. Special needs, I think, falls into the euphemism category. It's an alternative term that has been developed over the years to mean disability or disabled, a person with a disability or a human that is disabled. And as that language has evolved and grown, while I think the initial intent or the way that it's used a lot culturally typically is with good, even if not always informed intention, it has shifted or taken form at different times to be used to harm or in a negative way towards someone. That could be true of any disability term. You can take something that's neutral and make it mean if you change your tone or your context or the way that you're talking about or to someone. So I want to be mindful of that and careful as language continues to shift and change over the course of history. What we don't want to do is be like, here's this term. Oh, it's being used in a derogatory or negative way. We're going to come up with a different term in order to negate that. You're like, oh, now this term is being used in a negative or derogatory way. We're going to come up with a new term. Like, we can keep repeating history that way because you can always make something negative if you choose to ascribe negative context or connotation to something. And if we do that, we're never really attacking the root of what's the belief or the understanding or the value behind this term in the first place. So the focus, language is important. Meaning and understanding is, I think, equally as important. And if we're only focusing on one and not the other, then we don't have a complete or a whole picture, and we're not going to be in a place culturally or societally where we're actually seeing true change. It's not enough to just change the term. We also need to change the belief. As we're changing beliefs, hopefully language and terms are evolving and changing to better suit and represent that. So, back to special needs and where that fits in. Some very specific ways to not use the term special needs is to describe who someone is versus something that they may have. An example of that would be saying, he's so special needs versus this person has special needs. I personally still think that I have some hesitations and some holdups with the way that is used and operates, but there are people with disabilities who prefer to identify that way as having special needs. And if that's the case, then as we've discussed previously, it's really important that we honor, validate, accept, and practice that. In terms of my own language and how I talk about things, I feel like denoting something as special or someone having special needs feels elusive and evasive to me. I think we've come to have somewhat of an understanding of what falls underneath that special needs umbrella. However, it's very broad. A lot can get lumped in or under that term. And it, to me, still feels somewhat dehumanizing because it feels avoidant. And it's like, where's the line between having a need as a human and then having a special need? Where's the crossover? That feels very subjective to me. So that's personally why I prefer not to use the term, is because of that subjective nature. And I feel like it can be used to avoid or to talk around a disability that may be very specific or lead to a very specific experience in someone's life. It also, I think, can sometimes, and not always, so I'm not saying that this is across the board, but sometimes give the idea or paint a picture that having needs is not okay, or that that's burdensome in some way to yourself, to other people in your life, when we'll talk about this more in the future, when truly a lot of the barriers that a person with a disability may face in our world is because of the way that our world is constructed and the lack of accommodations or adaptability that we have societally, and not that there's anything inherently wrong or bad about the disability in the first place. That's kind of the more nuanced aspect of why I don't personally prefer to use the term. And I think it can be diminishing to a disabled person's position or humanity. Like, an athlete should be an athlete, regardless of whether that athlete has a disability or not. A server in my restaurant is a server in my restaurant, whether they have a disability or not. I wouldn't say, here's a server and here's a special server. But we do that in other contexts. Like in school, you have students and then you have exceptional children, who are your EC students. These are my exceptional children students. These are my students with a disability. It's like, it marginalizes a group, and it somehow adds a qualifier as if to say they're not just a student. It's like, no, they are a student. It's a student with a disability. And here's a student without a disability. But they're at the base, they're still both students. And I think that sometimes in the language of special needs, special education, Special Olympics, exceptional children, we start to focus a lot on the disability and less on the human, recognizing that a person with a disability, that is part of their life, that is part of who they are, but it's not all of who they are. And so however we talk about disability or engage with it, I think it's important to remember the human first. If someone prefers special needs because that makes them feel safer and that makes them feel more human, then listen to that and respect it. I would draw some curiosity and awareness to yourself in how and when you're using that term, and what other bias or projection or focus might we be attaching to that term that could be either adding to or taking away from the person, and start there. So, those are some of my thoughts. We will touch on this more in future videos. If you have thoughts, questions, again, please drop them below. Sometimes when I get into these conversations and I start talking, I'm like, am I just going in a loop? Like, have we just circled and come back to the same place? And potentially, if I've done that, you can be like, you just put me in a loop. I think part of that is because so much of it is connected. When we're talking about disability, education, advocacy, employment, all of that, it's like, here, let's talk about this. Oh, but this is also connected to this over here, which is connected to this over here, to this. And so it's sometimes hard to just be completely linear with it, because it's not isolated, it's not detached from other bias, understanding, language, history, etc. There's so much to it, and there's so many different layers. I'm not trying to overwhelm you by giving it to you all at once, but I also don't want to be ignorant or act as if it's an isolated thing that we only need to pay attention to this one aspect, when knowing that this one thing actually touches on a lot of different things. And it's important to, even if we don't dive deep into all those other things, to at least recognize that they're there and know that things aren't as simple and potentially not as innocent as we may assume that they are. So that's our video for today. I think someone may be coming up the hallway. Susan was meeting with someone in the back. As always, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. We love getting to connect with you in this way each week. And we'll talk to you next week.